Hi, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to share something that's been sitting in the quiet corners of my heart for a long time. It's a story about love, about holding on, and about realizing that sometimes the person you care for the most still belongs to someone else, someone they once loved and maybe never stopped loving. This isn't just a story, it's my truth, and maybe it's yours too. So listen closely, because this is what it feels like to love someone who still loves their ex. The box had been untouched for months, maybe even a year. Dust clung to its corners like the past refusing to let go. Tucked beneath a stack of forgotten clothes and faded photographs, it waited, quiet, patient. When fingers finally brushed against its lid again, it felt colder than remembered, heavier somehow. Inside, time had folded itself into brittle pages and fragile ink. Letters, yellowed at the edges, still carried the scent of an old perfume, faint but stubborn. Opening the first envelope was like unlocking a memory that had been too tightly sealed. The handwriting danced across the page in the way her words used to dance in the air. Oft, full of feeling, she wrote like she spoke, with pauses that meant something, with flourishes that never needed explanation. Every sentence was a window to a day long gone. There was one from that evening at the cafe by the river, where laughter had echoed off the water and silence felt like comfort, not absence. She had written about the way the breeze had tangled her hair and how it had felt like the world was finally still. Reading it now, the breeze returned, but it chilled instead of calmed. Each letter was a snapshot, but not the kind framed on walls. These were private portraits, painted in words too tender to share with anyone else. One spoke of a rainy day spent doing nothing but listening to songs and watching droplets slide down the glass like racing thoughts. Another described a moment under the stars, where promises had been made in whispers too hopeful to hold. She had believed those promises. She had written as if the future had already been drawn in ink. The pages never spoke of endings. There was no warning in her lines, no shadow of goodbye. That was what hurt the most. They were filled with beginnings that never expected to be interrupted. The innocence of her hope turned each letter into a quiet ache. It wasn't just the words. It was the rhythm of her thoughts, the way she saw love not as something borrowed but something built. She had built something with every sentence, and piece by piece, it all stood again now in trembling hands. Some letters had smudges, tiny blurs where ink had mixed with tears, maybe from writing them, maybe from reading them again and again before finally letting them go. It wasn't clear anymore. Time had made everything hazy, but the feeling remained sharp. Her voice echoed through each fold of the paper, not in sound, but in something deeper, in the memory of how her presence used to feel, like a hand resting gently without needing to hold. One letter, shorter than the rest, carried only a few lines. A thank you she had written, for patience, for understanding, for making her believe in quiet mornings and loud laughter. She had underlined one phrase, "You make it feel easy to stay." The irony was unbearable. That letter had been written just weeks before the leaving, before everything that felt permanent had collapsed under the weight of silence and distance. There were no answers in the box, only echoes. No reasons, just reminders. The letters didn't explain what went wrong. They only proved what once felt right, and somehow that was harder to face, because it meant it was real. It meant it had lived, breathed, and bloomed, even if only for a season. And even seasons return in memory, if not in life. Fingers folded each letter carefully, as if to press the past back into place without breaking it. The box wasn't closed this time. It was left slightly open on purpose, as if one day the words might be needed again. Not to relive, but to remember. Not to return, but to feel what was once possible. Some stories don't end in rage or betrayal. Some simply fade, carried away by time, not torn by conflict. And in that fading, there is still beauty. A fragile, painful beauty that reminds us what it means to care so deeply that even after it's gone, the memory whispers through old letters. The station was alive with movement, suitcases rolling over the tiled floor, footsteps echoing beneath the high ceiling, voices rising and falling like waves. Yet within all the noise, there was still a kind of silence. It settled in the spaces between moments, in the pause before the next announcement, in the stillness of a gaze scanning the crowd not for its size, but for someone it once knew. She used to appear in moments like these, unannounced, unexpected, always glowing in a way the world couldn't quite match. The kind of presence that made time slow for just a breath. That face, etched into memory, had become something more than real. It was hope. It was home. It was a question that never stopped being asked. Eyes moved from one stranger to another, searching not for just a face, but for a feeling. It was never about the hair or the clothes or even the features. It was about the way her eyes used to meet his with quiet certainty, the way her smile wasn't always wide, but always warm. Somewhere out there, that look might still exist, maybe cast at someone else now, maybe never again. The crowd blurred into color and motion, but still the search continued, not with desperation, but with something softer, an ache that had become a rhythm. Because love, when real, doesn't simply vanish. It hides in familiar corners, it lingers in crowds, it waits in memories and wonders if it will ever be recognized again. She used to say she loved people, watching. She would make up stories about couples holding hands, families arguing over train schedules, children chasing pigeons. But the story they never imagined was their own, the one that ended not with a slammed door or a final goodbye, but with distance slowly settling like dust. And now, here he stood again, where stories crossed paths, quietly hoping that fate might rewrite theirs. There were moments when a glimpse would catch the eye, someone with her posture, or hair falling the same way, or a scarf she might have worn. The breath would hitch, the world would pause, and then the illusion would break, gentle but unkind. She was not here, but the hope still showed up, uninvited, relentless. Love leaves footprints, even when the road ends. Every face in the crowd was a question, and the answer was always the same. No, not her. Yet the eyes kept searching, because somewhere inside, the heart refused to forget how it felt to find her once before, without warning, in a place just like this. And if it happened once, maybe it wasn't impossible. Maybe memories weren't all that was left. What hurt more was knowing she probably didn't look for him anymore, that her eyes might pass over crowds now without that quiet longing, that her love had found rest somewhere else. But some hearts are wired differently. They keep looking, even after they know what they won't find. The station announcement crackled overhead, pulling people from thoughts and sending them moving in new directions. Another train, another chance, but the face didn't appear. Not this time, maybe not ever. Still, the eyes stayed wide, open not just in sight, but in hope. Because when a face once meant everything, it never really becomes just another face. It becomes the measure of every other. It becomes the light by which all others are seen, and the shadow behind every smile that doesn't quite reach the heart. Some search the world for new beginnings. Others keep looking back, not out of regret, but out of a love too deep to be erased by time. And so the crowd shifts and flows, The world keeps moving, and still, one gaze continues. Steady, quiet, believing in a reunion that may never come, but always lives in the space between the present and what could have been. And even as the trains come and go, the eyes never stop searching the crowd for one face. The cafe hadn't changed much. The same soft hum of music played in the background. The same wooden chairs creaked under quiet conversations, and the same warm lights hung low from the ceiling. But something felt different, not in the room itself, but in the way it all felt without her. It used to be their place. Now, it was just a place with memories folded into corners that no one else could see. She used to sit near the window, always insisting on that particular table, the one where the light hit just right in the afternoons. Her smile would arrive before her words did, glowing in a way that made everything else fade out. That smile had a way of turning even an ordinary day into something worth remembering. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was soft, kind, filled with something rare. It was home. That smile had lived in all the little moments. In the shared glances over coffee cups, in the laughter that bubbled up during quiet jokes, in the way she'd gently tease, then offer a look that said it was all love. It wasn't just about being happy. It was about being safe, seen, held even in silence. Now there was only the echo of those smiles. The table was still there, the light still poured in, but the warmth had gone. It wasn't in the air anymore. It wasn't in the eyes of the person sitting across the room, or in the hands folded around a steaming mug. That kind of smile, the one born of deep love and quiet knowing, had vanished. It wasn't sudden. Love doesn't always leave in a storm. Sometimes it just slips away, unnoticed at first, like the sun lowering beneath the horizon until one day you realize you've been sitting in the dark. Her smile had faded slowly. It had shown up less in photos, lingered less in conversations, and finally disappeared altogether. There had been a time when everything felt full, each moment, each word, each shared silence. Now everything felt half, drawn like a sketch left unfinished. And yet he could still see her there. Not the way she looked in the end, but the way she looked when they still believed in forever. When love felt like a promise, not a question. It was strange how places could hold on to feelings long after the people had gone. The cushion on that chair still looked like it belonged to her. The barista still gave a smile that reminded him of how she used to wave when walking in, just a little late, always with some excuse that made him laugh. The world hadn't moved on from her. Only she had moved on from this world with him in it. There's a kind of emptiness that doesn't shout. It sits quietly beside you, like an old friend who doesn't need to speak to be felt. That was how it was now. No anger, no blame. Just the aching stillness that comes after something beautiful ends. It wasn't about wanting her back. It was about missing the way love used to live here. In this cafe, in that smile, in the unspoken things that no longer had someone to hear them. Some people leave and you forget what their laugh sounded like. Others leave and you remember every little thing. The way their eyes crinkled when they smiled, the way their fingers curled around a coffee cup, the way they sighed when something truly mattered. And even when time does its best to blur those edges, some details stay sharp. Because love, when real, carves its mark deep. He sat there a while longer, watching as people came and went. Some smiled. Some didn't, but none of them wore the kind of smile that once lit this place from the inside out, and maybe they never would. Maybe that kind of smile only visits once in a lifetime. Sometimes the heart doesn't break loudly. Sometimes it simply quiets, stops asking, stops expecting, but still remembers what it felt like when smiles didn't need to be forced, when love lived easily, and when happiness didn't feel like something borrowed. And so the cafe stays the same, the light still golden, the music still soft. But the smile that once brought it all to life is gone, and what remains is a warmth that no longer reaches the skin, only the memory. Smiles fade where love once lived. The dreams always came without warning. Some nights were quiet, wrapped in the weight of sleep, offering nothing but rest. But then there were the other nights, the ones where the past slipped in unnoticed, where time unraveled and she returned. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as if she had never left at all. In those dreams, nothing had changed. Her voice still carried the same softness. Her touch still warmed the coldest parts of the heart. And her eyes still held that look, the one that said everything would be okay. They would walk down streets that no longer existed, hand in hand, beneath skies that never rained. They would laugh about things that had once made the world feel like theirs alone. The laughter in those dreams felt real, so real it stayed echoing long after waking. Every detail was sharp. The way her hair brushed against her cheek when the wind blew, the way she used to hum songs without even realizing it, the way she would look over her shoulder with a smile meant for no one else. In the dreams, there were no goodbyes, no distance, no long silences that stretched between unanswered messages. There was only closeness, the kind that couldn't be broken even by time. Her fingers still curled perfectly into his. Her words still found their way straight to the places he had kept locked. Everything that was once so painful to remember became beautiful again, only for those few quiet hours between night and morning. And then the morning would come. The sunlight would creep in through the curtains, soft and indifferent. The warmth of the dream would begin to slip away, like sand through fingers. Reality would settle back into place, slow but sure, reminding him that she was no longer here. The bed once shared was now just space. The air no longer carried her scent. Her voice, so vivid just moments before, became just another silence. Waking from those dreams always brought a strange kind of ache. Not sharp, not loud, just deep. A silent reminder that the heart still hadn't let go, that somewhere inside, a part of him was still waiting for something that would never return. And yet, there was comfort in those dreams too, a fragile comfort, but real, because for a little while he could feel her again. He could believe, even if falsely, that love hadn't slipped through his hands. Some people say dreams are just the brain's way of cleaning house. Others say they're messages from the heart. But what if they're neither? What if they're simply the soul's last attempt to hold on to something it can't bear to lose? Because the dreams don't lie, they don't invent her. They remember her exactly as she was, not as the one who left, but as the one who loved. It was always the little things that left the strongest marks, the way she'd pause before speaking, the way her head tilted when thinking, the way her presence filled a room even when she wasn't trying. In the daylight, those memories felt far, but in the quiet of sleep, they came back with a clarity that hurt in the best way, not to torture, but to remind, to keep the love alive, if only in shadows. There had been a time when the future was something they built together, dream by dream, word by word. Now, the only future left with her lived inside the past, lived over and over in midnight movies no one else could see. It wasn't about clinging to what was lost. It was about honoring what had once been so real that even sleep refused to let it go. Morning would always come. The world would keep spinning. People would talk and laugh and move on. But inside, somewhere quiet, the dreams would wait. They weren't escapes. they were returns to a feeling that had no expiration date, to a love that didn't know how to forget itself. And maybe that was the hardest part, not that she was gone, but that even now, love still knew her name. Because some nights, when the stars were kind and the heart brave enough to rest, she would appear again, not as a memory, but as something felt, real, near, unchanged. Dreams replay moments that felt real. The apartment had never been loud, not even when it was full. They weren't the kind of couple who filled space with noise. Their love was quieter, felt in the clink of a spoon against a mug, in shared glances during morning routines, in the way breaths aligned when they sat close on the couch, saying nothing but saying everything. Now the quiet remained, but it had changed. It didn't feel warm anymore. It felt like something missing had stretched itself across the walls, claiming every empty corner. There was a time when silence meant comfort. It meant understanding without words, peace without pressure. She could be in the kitchen, humming something under her breath, while he read in the next room, and the air between them would hum with a calm certainty. That silence was soft. It carried weight, but the kind you wanted to hold. Now the silence pressed down, heavy and unfamiliar, like walking into a room and forgetting why you came. Some sounds are so familiar that you don't even notice them until they're gone. The zip of her coat when she rushed out, always late but always smiling. The way she cleared her throat before asking something serious. The faint laugh at the end of her sentences when she wasn't sure she made sense, but hoped he understood anyway. None of those sounds exist anymore. What remains is a stillness that grows louder each day. At night, it's the worst. The world outside continues. Cars passing, distant voices, wind brushing against the window. But inside, there's only absence. The bed feels too wide, the air too still. No quiet breathing beside him, no sleepy sighs. Just the kind of silence that wraps around the heart and reminds it that something essential has been lost. She didn't slam the door when she left. There was no dramatic ending, no shouting, just space, more and more of it until one day the silence wasn't just a pause, it was permanent, and maybe that's what makes it so hard, because it didn't break. It faded, and fading things are harder to grieve. They don't offer the sharpness of goodbye, only the soft confusion of absence. Even now, sometimes the ears trick the heart. A creak in the hallway sounds like footsteps. A laugh from the street feels like it might be hers. The mind knows better, but the heart listens differently. It hears what it wants to hear, what it misses, what it still hopes for even when hope feels foolish. He stopped playing music around the house. It felt wrong, somehow, like covering up something that needed to be felt, because the silence, painful as it was, spoke the truth. It held her in its arms in a way sound couldn't. It echoed her name without speaking it. It remembered the tone of her voice not by repeating it, but by mourning its absence. Some days there's a conversation that almost begins, a thought, a sentence, a whisper meant for someone who's no longer there. The words never make it out. They die in the throat, unfinished, unspoken. But their presence lingers, another reminder that the heart hasn't stopped talking to someone who no longer answers. Friends say time heals, but time also deepens certain things. It sharpens memories. It makes silence more noticeable. Because once you know what a room sounds like when filled with love, you never stop hearing what's missing. The apartment hasn't changed much. Her things are mostly gone, but some remain. A book with her handwriting in the margins. A scarf still hanging behind the door. A coffee mug with a tiny crack she refused to throw away. Each item rests in the silence, untouched but full of presence. They don't speak, but they remind. They whisper in a language only the heart understands. It's not about wanting to go back. It's about learning how to exist in a world where the echoes outlive the voice, where silence doesn't just mean quiet, it means longing. And even when surrounded by noise, even in the company of others, there's always a part of the soul listening for something that will never come back. Because when love was once spoken daily, its absence becomes the loudest sound of all. Every silence echoes a missing voice. There are days when everything feels fine on the surface. Work gets done, conversations are had, the world spins forward like it's supposed to. But beneath it all, beneath the carefully composed rhythm of daily life, something stays. Quiet, stubborn, unexplainable. The heart still holds on and no one really knows why. There's no logic to it. No reason that makes sense anymore. She's gone. Time has passed. Life has changed. But the heart doesn't seem to understand what the mind has accepted. It happens in the smallest ways. A song comes on unexpectedly, and suddenly her face is there, not as a memory, but as a feeling. The kind of feeling that rises without warning and settles behind the ribs, making it just a little harder to breathe. That song used to play on their late night drives, when the roads were empty and it felt like the world belonged only to them. Now, the same notes bring something else entirely, longing wrapped in silence. There's no one to call when those moments strike. No one who would quite understand. How do you explain missing someone who made the decision to leave? How do you justify waiting for something that may never return? You don't. You just live with it. You carry it quietly, like a stone in your chest, shaping everything without ever being seen. Sometimes friends ask if it's still hard, and the answer is always the same, though it's rarely said out loud. It's not hard in the way it was at first, not sharp or unbearable. It's different now, lower, deeper, a dull ache instead of a wound. But still there, always. Some days it hums gently in the background. Other days it rises unexpectedly and pulls everything down with it. But it never truly disappears. She wasn't perfect, and things weren't always easy. But love isn't about perfection. It's about presence, and she was that, fully and deeply, in ways that changed everything. It didn't matter what they were doing shopping for groceries, folding laundry, sitting in silence. With her, even the ordinary felt like something more. That's what made it so hard when she left. Not the loss of big moments, but the quiet things. The way she would brush her hand against his just because. The way she'd say his name when the world felt too heavy. Even now, the heart replays those little moments, like a favorite movie on repeat. It doesn't care that the story has ended. It doesn't care that she's with someone else now, planning a future he'll never see. The heart doesn't measure reality the way logic does. It doesn't calculate who deserves what, or weigh what's fair. It just remembers how it felt to be loved by her, and it holds onto that without asking why. There were times when letting go seemed possible, when the pain had dulled enough to imagine new beginnings, and maybe those beginnings will come someday. But even then, there will be a part of the heart that never stops carrying her name. Not because she should come back, not because he wants to rewrite the past, but because some people settle into you so deeply, their absence becomes a part of your structure. You learn to live with the shape they left behind. It's not about hope anymore. It's about truth. The truth that some loves don't end with goodbye. They just move from the outside to the inside, from shared moments to silent memories. And even when you try to move forward, there's a part of you that always looks back, not out of weakness, but because something beautiful happened that deserves to be remembered. And so the heart holds on. Through mornings that feel heavy, through conversations that feel empty, through nights that end in quiet, it holds on not because it wants to, but because it knows no other way. It holds on because that's what love does when it runs too deep to be erased by time or distance. The world may move on, faces change, voices fade, but deep within, in the place where no one else can reach, something remains. Soft, steady, unreasoned. The heart holds on without reason. I never thought love could feel like this, so full, yet so empty. Sometimes you give your heart to someone who's already given theirs away, and no matter how hard you try, you're just standing in the shadow of someone they still miss. But even in the pain, I've learned something. Love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes the strongest kind of love is learning to let go. So this is me, saying goodbye, not just to him, but to the version of myself that waited, hoped, and hurt in silence. Thank you for listening to my story. If your heart's been through something similar, just know you're not alone. Goodbye.